Welcome to the KayaCast, the podcast for cannabis businesses looking to launch, grow, and scale their operations. Each week, we bring you interviews with industry experts and successful retailers, plus practical tips and strategies to help you succeed in the fast-growing cannabis industry.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We have a special episode. I am here with Aaron, the founder and CEO of the NCIA, the oldest and largest organization, I would say, in the world, right? You got to be the largest.
Yeah, I guess so.
In the world. So it's nice having you on.
Great to be here.
So, for the very small group of people that are listening that do not know about the NCIA, can you just give us a quick kind of a summary on what you guys are about?
Yeah, so we are a trade association that represents the industry very broadly across the United States. We represent cannabis businesses from all verticals, from growers to retailers to manufacturers and processors, as well as all of the ancillary businesses that are in the space. And our focus is federal lobbying, change federal law so that here in the United States we can have interstate commerce and be treated fairly like any other legal American industry.
Well, changing federal law, not an easy task.
Yeah, certainly these days, getting Congress to do anything, even keeping the government open, is a big deal now. So, but we're up to the task, and there's some light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
So I know that there has been some news regarding reclassification, right? So talk to us about what is the forefront of what's going on with cannabis reclassification.
Yeah, so it's kind of just backing up to about a year ago, the president directed FDA and the Health and Human Services Department to come up with a recommendation on whether cannabis should be reclassified. It's currently in a Schedule 1 status under U.S. law, which means it has supposedly has no medical benefit, no medical value, and a high potential for abuse, meaning that it can't be prescribed by doctors. It's up there with heroin and LSD. So fast forward to the summer. The FDA came out with the recommendation to DEA that cannabis should be moved from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Schedule 3 is not making the industry legal. Schedule 3 would, but Schedule 3 does acknowledge medical benefit. It puts cannabis next to drugs like, steroids and drugs that have a high potential for abuse yet have a great medical value, which we don't believe cannabis has a high potential for abuse, but it's a step in the right direction.
So what is the main differences from having a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 classification to Schedule 3?
Yeah, so Schedule 1 to 3 means that, for the cannabis industry as we know it, there's not a lot of changes. The cannabis industry would still be operating outside of federal law because to get a Schedule 3 pharmaceutical out there, like I said, steroids is an example of a Schedule 3 pharmaceutical. To get that on the market, it has to go through FDA trials. It's upwards of $1 billion process to get an FDA approved drug on the market, and then it needs to be prescribed by a doctor under very strict conditions. It needs to be dispensed through a pharmacy, not a dispensary, a state licensed dispensary. So the state licensed businesses would still be really outside of that system. It could open up opportunities for, and it will open up opportunities for pharmaceuticalized cannabis, and that's not a bad thing, but that still doesn't meet the needs of the modern cannabis consumer. One benefit it'll have to the industry, though, is that it eliminates the burden of Section 280E of the tax code. So that's huge for anybody's trying to operate in the space. Knows that if you're trafficking, quote unquote, trafficking in cannabis or any Schedule 1 or 2 substance, you can't deduct the expenses from your taxes. That will go away when it moves to Schedule 3, and that's huge for the industry. And then it also creates momentum for descheduling, we call it. Actually moving forward with federal legalization down the road.
So that's probably the biggest change is not having to deal with 280E, and especially if you're a vertically integrated cannabis business, just dispensary.
Yeah.
280E is it makes it so difficult to run profitably and actually make money in this industry. So that's huge. But what you're saying is, from a federal standpoint, nothing kind of changes in terms of the legality. So does this mean that if there's an abundance of product in one state, you can't really necessarily ship it to another state to sell?
Yeah, this would not legalize the interstate commerce. It again doesn't actually legalize the activity that's already happening in the states. There are some concerns, and they're valid concerns, but I don't share them as much as others. But there are some concerns that actually moving to Schedule 3, there's now a whole new federal statute that comes into play, the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act, which is enforced by the FDA. So it kind of moves the jurisdiction from DEA to FDA, and the FDA could begin sending letters out to every licensed marijuana business in the country saying you're out of compliance with the law. These drugs are not approved by the FDA, and you need to stop. That for the cost of a postage stamp, they could really upend the industry doing that. I don't think that that's likely, but it is something that's of concern, and we're working with Congress and the administration to have some enforcement guidance. On the congressional side, Congress has the opportunity to defund that sort of behavior, so that sort of activity from FDA. They could say, if businesses are compliant with state law, the FDA does not have the authority to use tax dollars to undermine those state laws and go after those businesses, essentially. And they've done something similar for medical cannabis dating back to 2014. That's continues to be in the federal budget. So that's one way. That's one way to affect the enforcement priorities. Another way would be, which I think is pretty likely, would be to have a memo out of the Justice Department that says, just to clarify, we're using our enforcement priorities to go after illegal marijuana businesses, not state compliant cannabis businesses that are licensed under state laws. And I think politically that's the likely outcome. Certainly the Biden administration doesn't want to have a crackdown on cannabis. This whole change is being made. And I can say, I'll back up and say the change isn't necessarily being made. This is a recommendation. I think it will be acted upon. But when it is acted upon, it's being done so because there's political pressure to relax cannabis laws, because 70% of Americans want to see it legal. Biden is not the biggest fan of cannabis himself, but his campaign and the people around him are saying you need to do something. So if to have this backfire into a series of crackdowns seems unlikely, and even if we have a Trump presidency, which that's the likely nominee on the GOP side. Well, we've already been through a Trump presidency, and there was no crackdown then. So I think that likelihood we're going to see sort of a status quo where the federal government just turns the other way at state licensed businesses for the most part. But we have relief from 280E, and but we got to continue to fight for descheduling so that we can have interstate commerce, so that we can have banking access that's normalized, and really to treat the industry fairly like any other industry.
Gotcha. So how close are we to reclassification or rescheduling?
So that your guess is as good as mine, to be honest on that. But I would expect this to be done before the election. I think this is sort of there's political pressure to get this done. It's not going to be, it's not an expedient process. The FDA and the DEA, these are slow moving organizations. The way that the process works is that FDA made the recommendation. DEA now they can do whatever they want with it. The DEA has authority to reschedule, and they're the only agency that does. So I think the likely outcome is that they will to accept the recommendation to move this to Schedule 3 because, the DEA also reports to the president, the DEA administrator, and but to get there needs to be an administrative review process, which takes some time. It'll include public comment, so they'll hear comments from organizations like ours that are going to say, we support Schedule 3 as an interim measure, but really this needs to be descheduled. That's our position, which the DEA has the authority to do as well. I don't think they will, but they have the authority to. And they'll hear from others, folks on the other side that are saying, the reefer madness people that are saying, this needs to be kept in Schedule 1, even though that defies all reason and science on the issue. And then it will go through that process, and then they could make an official change. So I think it's certainly I think it's certainly likely to happen before the election, but it could be the summer of next year, fall, before it really takes effect.
Gotcha. So the DEA is the only organization responsible for reclassifying substances. And then
Well, it's the DEA or Congress, so it could happen through congressional action.
That's fascinating to me that the inner workings of how things get changed. So the DEA and Congress, they're the bodies that are responsible for reclassification, and any substance that's on Schedule 3, it's really the FDA that's responsible for administering and making sure that what are the processes that this substance can be sold federally.
Yeah, the FDA would have the jurisdiction over any of these drugs that are prescription drugs. You go to the pharmacy and you get codeine or antibiotics, whatever it is. Those are all under the jurisdiction of the FDA, and this would put cannabis there alongside. An example of another Schedule 3 drug would be Marinol, which is synthetic THC that's used for for a number of conditions. So this would put that there. But yeah, Congress has the authority to change the law. They could, Congress can do the law was created. The Controlled Substances Act was created by Congress. They could repeal it if they wanted to. And they could certainly amend it in any way. And I don't think that, and then the administration through the DEA has the authority to change the schedule so they can move something up or down. They have actually never moved anything from Schedule 1 down to 2 or 3 in the past. They've only actually moved in the other direction. So this is sort of unprecedented in that regard.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm a novice when it comes to the inner workings of the government, so I'm happy that we're connected. I'm learning a lot, actually. This is probably one of the biggest piece of legislation that I think our listeners are really interested in. And the second part really is banking. So reclassifying to Schedule 3, that doesn't change banking at all, does it?
No, this because again, the businesses of the cannabis industry as we know it would still be out of compliance with federal law, which would still give banks some caution when it comes to especially providing lending. A lot more banks are providing depository services now, but there's still a lack of access to lending and that kind of financing. So there's the Safer Banking Act, which has been pending in Congress for a number of years, that is continuing to build support that would address the banking issue just kind of on its own. It doesn't really address any other issues around around cannabis prohibition, but that would provide some relief on the banking front. And we're hopeful that in the next year we could see that passed as well. But it's been an uphill battle getting anything done in Congress these days, as anybody watching the news would know.
So why has the Safe Banking Act, and I know that's been around and it's been on the floor quite a few times, what is the holdup?
Well, I mean, there's kind of right now it's general congressional dysfunction. I mean, you've got partisanship, at a level where it's never been, where you have, the Republicans don't want to give the Democrats a win, and vice versa, and they're very reluctant to work with each other to get anything done. So that's a problem that is facing the country. It has nothing to do with cannabis, and
Mhm.
that's everybody who's working on Capitol Hill is frustrated by that scenario. But it also has had headwind over the years, just because especially Republican members of Congress see that this is ceding to the marijuana movement, and they still are digging in as the reefer madness kind of minded Republican members. But there's less and less of those, and we're seeing especially as more states come on, well, that those members of Congress now represent voters who voted to make this legal. And even if they don't support legalization, more and more are coming to the mind that we need to do something about the banking issue, because having a very cash heavy business in your district as a member of Congress is a magnet, can be a magnet for crime and other problems.
Can you talk a little bit about the Safe Banking Act? Like, what is the Safe Banking Act, and what are the changes proposed in this bill?
So, the current situation is you have anti-money laundering laws, banking regulations that uh, prevent banks from doing business with the industry without fearing that they're going to run afoul of those laws and that they're going to get sanctioned by Department of Treasury in some way. I'll say that Treasury Department has not been going after banks, but they're very risk averse. This would provide an exemption saying, if these businesses are state licensed businesses, that there's kind of a safe harbor for financial institutions looking to do business with them. That's in effect, that's what it does. It also would open up access to credit card processing for the industry, which is another big while they can put their cash in a bank account these days, most businesses have bank accounts where they can deposit their cash, a checking account. They don't have access to credit card processing, which means that it's a cash heavy industry. It's burdensome to have this cash. It's dangerous. It's a nuisance to the consumer who has to go to an ATM in order to get their cannabis, and all of that gets resolved by this bill, and it does really little else. It doesn't really, this is why it has more support on the Republican side, is it doesn't do a lot of other things that advocates like us would like to see. And that's why it has the support of the American Bankers Association, which frankly is far more powerful organization than mine, that has the ear of Congress.
Gotcha. So this is, it's a step in the right direction. I mean, declassifying is the ultimate kind of the ultimate goal that we have. But these two
Yeah.
are big. I mean, I can see it helping a lot of businesses in states like Alaska, for example, who don't necessarily have really good access to banking, and it's quite expensive as well. Is there anything else that's happening that you want to share with everybody today, and what's going on in Washington?
Well, I mean, right now it's Congress is sort of in a bad place. They're struggling to keep the government open, but they're heading toward an election. We just had a poll that was sort of the gold standard polling, is the Gallup poll, which has been asking voters what they think of marijuana legalization since 1969, I think, every year. Started off, it was in the single digits for support in 1969, and now is 70% of Americans say they want to see marijuana made legal. And that's across every single demographic. That's conservative voters, progressive voters, Republican voters, Democratic voters, baby boomers, millennials, Gen Z. Every demographic has majority support. And we also just hit a tipping point when Ohio voted to legalize cannabis in that state a couple weeks ago, where now more than half of Americans live in a state where it's legal. 53% live in a state where it's legal. So, this means that most members of Congress represent a state where it's legal. And, almost half of the Senate represents a state where it's legal. And that's, really going to move the dial, I think, as we head into the election. And anybody who's, running for elected office needs to look at those numbers and realize this is an issue that they have to embrace, or they're going to get left behind.
I love it. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. And the work that you guys are doing is really pushing the pace towards declassification. We're a member of the NCIA, and maybe I want to take some time to talk to the audience on why you should be a member what is the benefit of being a member of NCIA and the work that you guys do?
Yeah, well, thank you for your membership, and I would, I guess, say, let's not say it's inevitable, because it's not, and it seems inevitable because of this work that has been happening behind the scenes for decades. NCIA has been doing this since 2010 on behalf of the businesses, but there were people that came before us that were advocating for this for longer than I've been alive, and this is not. There are a lot of issues facing Congress right now, from gun safety to climate change to the national debt. There are a lot of issues facing Congress, and the only way that you can move an issue up through the priority list is to have advocates, lobbyists on the ground in Washington, D.C., working on your behalf. And that's what NCIA does. We make sure that the small businesses in the cannabis industry have a voice in DC, and we do this only for our members. We're a nonprofit. We exist only because of our members that fund that work. So that's really the primary reason to be a member, is to support this cause. And then we also have a myriad of benefits that we provide our members in exchange for their support for supporting the movement, and that's networking opportunities, access to market data, and exclusive educational opportunities that can be found at our website, thecannabisindustry.org.
Yeah, and the market data, everybody, is king. The market data that you guys have access to, it really helps in shape a business's direction. And knowledge is power, right? So it's been an unbelievable resource for us as an organization.
Yeah, that's right. And we want to make sure that our members have a competitive advantage over people that are in the industry that are really just here to kind of ride the wave and aren't part of the movement, because there are folks that are kind of isolated and just think that, well, I can come here and make a buck. Our members are here for the long term, to build a sustainable, prosperous industry for decades to come, and we want to make sure that they have a competitive advantage over others in the space, and happy to support them in any way we can.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And it's amazing work that you guys are doing, and really keep up the good work.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the KayaCast podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app, or visit our website to learn more about our guests and to access the full archive of episodes from the show. Join us next time as we continue to explore the world of cannabis and help you grow, launch, and scale your business.